The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of Talk Radio AM 640.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Roger, backup clock is started.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on Talk Radio AM 640.
I'm the Spaceman. This is View from Space. I'd like to welcome you in right now if you're listening to the radio station, Talk Radio AM 640, or if you're at work right now listening via the Radio Player Canada app, picking up the show that way, I welcome you in. Or if you're picking me up right now, free on Apple Music, I welcome you in also. Or maybe you're what some call the best seat in the house, sitting in front of your Mac, your PC, logged on to 640toronto.com, picking up the live audio streaming there. I welcome you in. Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. The Illuminati-controlled mass media, all of this week, wall-to-wall coverage, of the hurricanes. And it is really into the hard sell mode for this extreme weather. All this year, actually, the year 2017, is meant to be historic. Historical hurricane year of 2017. Although Hurricane Irma, now downgraded to a Cat 3. Oh, but expected to strengthen. And Hurricane Jose, now hitting Cuba, downgraded to a Cat 4. It was the first time, though, and this is where they're really hard selling it, the first time in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's recorded history that there have been two Cat 5 hurricanes at the exact same time in the Atlantic Ocean. Remember the highest classification. In the Saffir-Simpson scale, Cat 5 are storms with sustained winds exceeding 156 miles an hour. That's 251 clicks an hour. Hurricane Irma's approach to Florida. Historic. Yeah, how? Causing the largest mass evacuation in all of history. Hurricane Jose, currently hitting Cuba right now, a Cat 4, is the first Cat 4 to hit the island of Cuba in 80 years. Are you getting a message yet? Oh. And the earthquake in Mexico. All this week. A strong one. A Sun Worshippers number 8.0. And it hits where? In the country of Mexico, in the very poorest of all Mexico. The very poorest area. The elite rich, you see, didn't shake their own modern-day business buildings like banks, hotels, and corporate headquarters. No, they shook it real good in a very, very poverty-stricken area of Mexico. One of the most poverty-stricken. So how can you tell? The world is a mere 13 days away from the high religious holiday of the Illuminati. The fall equinox, September 22. On the fall equinox, the goddess relinquishes her power to the now once again dominant male as the female passes her supreme authority to the male sun god. This means that throughout the next the next 6 months of this occult year, the male god now rules for those 6 with a more authoritarian style, a much more dominating, forceful way of wielding the power of rule. Watch it happen, because it's going to. just in the past few days, we've had 2 immensely destructive hurricanes in North America. One devastating earthquake and an horrific killer monsoon flood in East Asia, killing thousands, and a nuclear war threat. Just in the past few days. How can you tell? We're this far away from the fall equinox. And this, according to the Illuminati-controlled media, who are widely reporting about this nuclear threat, that North Korea is expected to launch an intercontinental ballistic missile at full range at any time, testing the long-range possibilities now. Possibly within hours from right now as I speak to you, in order to demonstrate beyond any shadow of a doubt that North Korea's long-range nuclear threat is real, which in turn would heavily stress the U.S., Chinese, and the U.S.-South Korean alliances as never before, wouldn't it? Which fits right into the Illuminati's playbook. You see, it was today, September 9th, back in 1948, was the date of the foundation of the nation known as the Democratic, it's a funny word to use, isn't it? The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, by Kim Jong-un's grandfather, Kim Il-sung, as today marks the 69th anniversary of its inception. However, I believe the window has already passed. Because usually, as a matter of fact, last year, on September 9th, Kim Jong-un had his 5th nuclear test on this date. And usually it's one of those annual events that they celebrate the birth of their country and shoot off a missile or blow a big one. But this year it didn't happen. Because you know what? It's already September 10th. It's just after 9 o'clock in the morning, Sunday, September 10th, in North Korea right now. So you can scratch that nuclear threat. Now we can concentrate on the extreme weather blamed on climate change. And that's what everyone's talking about. Well, what's causing all of this incredible extreme weather? Well, it's climate change. The Illuminati wizards are doing what they have always done. They used black magic knowledge in the ancient past, and they're doing it in this period that you and I are living in now. For instance, manipulating nature. The Druids did this in ancient times. How, you say? Well, in ancient times, the Druids would create great fog screens to attack their Roman enemies. First, they'd lure the enemy into an area of choice, which the Druid wizards knew had a propensity for thick fog to form naturally. Then, they would simply supersize the fog effect. How? By simply building large bonfires, heat the sky, in order to inject even hotter air into the low-lying area to collide with the cold air already in place, and immense fog would ensue, thick pea soup fog. Then the Druids would launch a surprise attack on the enemy at darkness. The enemy caught totally by surprise, of course. Fog, no chance of defending themselves whatsoever and be defeated. Well, the Druidic wizards of today have much more modern equipment and even more black magic knowledge and are using it on us. I'll tell you how, right after this break. This is Talk Radio AM 640. I'm the Spaceman. This is AVFS, and I'm just getting started. Hey, it's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. Communicate by email. You probably know that if you're a regular listener. Space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com are the two locations. And thank you so much for that one that you have sent. Yes, there's nothing new under the sun. History is simply repeating itself over and over. The Druids, the ancient Druids, knew how to harness nature in a crude way, but could do it in ancient times. Today, we have much more modern technology, much more, powerful information, and even more black magic knowledge. And they're using it on you and I to sell climate change. Yes, the wizards of today, the Illuminati, are harnessing the power of nature as no one has ever been able to do in the past. The elites now have the ability to shape weather patterns by influencing their determining factors. Yes, today's modern-day Druid wizards have the power to affect weather modification, which is, of course, the alteration of weather phenomena over a limited area for a short, limited period of time. Just as done with hurricanes to make them Cat 5s. See, naturally now, already, Irma is down to a Cat 3. Jose is a 4 from a 5. And once Hurricane Katia, she's now a feeble image of her former self. Down to not even Hurricane 1. She's down to a tropical depression. However, Irma still churning her way as a Cat 3 with the threat, according to the Illuminati-controlled mass media, of strengthening as it approaches Florida. Yes, today's modern-day Druid wizards have the power to affect weather modification. And it's been used for quite a while now. I've been watching chemtrailing for over 2 decades. Weather modification has been used for military purposes for a long time now. For instance, they'll often reduce the element of, say, what I've just described back in ancient times that the Druids did. The enhanced ability to reduce, even eliminate fog and friction to friendly operations, and then to significantly increase them for the enemy if they need to. This has gone from a military use only to a wider use today for an attack on the Western government's own citizens, in order to convince you of climate change as well as an economic blow. Transformation of this world is coming. The Illuminati are using chaos to create change. Change to what, you say? To a completely new system of business and governance, the New World Order. It's an alchemical transformation we're being put through. I mean, today they have aircraft to deploy chemtrails daily to manipulate weather conditions. They possess the equipment to produce ULF, or ultra-low frequency electromagnetic wave emission capabilities, which enables them to supersize earthquakes into large shakes. But it can only be done in earthquake-prone areas, just like supersizing hurricanes has to be done in areas that are hurricane-prone. For instance, they can't create an earthquake wherever they want. It has to be on a fault line. It has to be where they happen. Same thing with hurricanes. They can't just create a hurricane anywhere. It has to be in what they call Hurricane Alley, and only at a certain time of year. That's the way it is with weather manipulation today. 2017 going down as an historic extreme weather year. Most people in North America will tell you that their summer was a write-off. Low black crap. Months on end, all 2017, is what we've experienced. They are only able to create extreme weather conditions in extreme weather-prone areas. Remember that. In the case of the hurricanes, they're being supersized in areas where they naturally occur. Now, in the case of Mexico's largest earthquake in a century, I believe ULF, electromagnetic wave emission capabilities, were deployed, which supersize earthquakes. Supersized a mild earthquake into a magnitude 8.0 in Mexico that was felt as far away as Mexico City and Guatemala City. Mexico City is some 600 miles. That's 1,000 kilometers away from the epicenter of that shaker. It registered off Mexico's southern coast, just as heavy rains from Hurricane, now Tropical Depression, Katia, was lashing the other side of Mexico to the east. The epicenter of this quake was in the Pacific Ocean, 74 miles. It's 120 clicks off the coast in the ocean. Want proof of my claim of man's manipulation with that quake? Here it is. There were, in fact, eyewitnesses to the visual phenomenon that always accompanies ultra-low frequency electromagnetic wave emission pulses. People that live in that area. Very poor, by the way. It hit in the poorest area of Mexico. That was the most shaken. Said that they saw mysterious green and blue flashes in the sky at the time of the quake hitting. You can even check it out for yourself on the net right now. News channels have not covered it on the Illuminati-controlled mass media, but on the internet, you can go to news sites that will actually show you pictures of the mysterious green flashes lighting up the sky after the tremor. Those green and blue flashes seen by those eyewitnesses is the arcing of the ultra-low frequency electromagnetic wave emissions that were used to induce that earthquake. Let me explain it to you like this. You're walking along the street. Somebody comes up to you, they have their windows wide open, or maybe it's a convertible, and they've got their music cranked, and they put in those really good speakers, in the back seat, and they're just booming. I mean, the ground is almost shaking. Inside of your heart at rock concerts, it happens the same way inside of your body. Your heart is squeezed. All of your organs, your vital organs in your body are squeezed with the trauma from the waves of sound coming out of the marshals on stage. That's why people come out all strung out widely, tightened up, just like exploding with, anger sometimes, energy, especially at a metal concert. But their body has been squeezed. And the reaction of the nervous system has tightened all of the muscles. Now, remember the guy that just pulled up to you as you were walking along the street? And you can actually feel the sound waves hitting your chest. Now, I want you to magnify that with low frequency electronic emissions by 1,000,000. It can can shake rock. You could even knock a building down with that sound wave, if you so desired. It was directed directly at the target. That's how ULF works. Ultra low frequency electromagnetic waves. You can induce an earthquake to become a monster quake. I remember hearing the exact same eyewitness accounts in the 7.0 Haiti earthquake back in 2010 that was covered extensively here, by the way, on AVFS on Talk Radio, AM 640. Weather manipulation. My. I'm letting the cat out of the bag. A lot of people never heard about it before or thought it was a conspiracy theory. This is not a conspiracy show. AVFS bases things on fact alone, not theories of possibilities and wondering and coincidences. More facts next on Talk Radio AM 640. It's the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640, AVFS, the show. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Weather manipulation is real, and it's affecting your life now. And the elites want you to believe the earth is a living being, spiritual being, that is mad as hell and is not going to take it anymore and is hitting back with gargantuan earthquakes, superstorms, and extreme weather. No, it's man and weather manipulation. In 1970, former national U.S. security advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote in his book called Between the Two Ages that technology will make available to the leaders of major nations techniques for conducting secret warfare. Techniques of weather modification could be used to produce prolonged periods of drought or create storms and maneuver them. In the late 60s, the world-renowned geophysicist Professor Gordon MacDonald was a member of the President's Science Advisory Committee in the U.S. and later a member of the U.S. President's Council on Environmental Quality. In 1968, he publishes a book called Unless Peace Comes, that had a chapter in it called How to Wreck the Environment. He described the use of weather manipulation, climate modification, polar ice cap melting, or destabilization, ozone depletion, and you haven't heard that for a while, have you? Techniques. These techniques of earthquake engineering, ocean wave control, and brainwave manipulation using the planet's energy fields and high-frequency active auroral research program by the United States, commonly called HAARP. It's just a great big generating station for ULF, ultra-low frequency electromagnetic pulses. He also said that these types of weapons would be developed. This was back in the 60s, and when used would be virtually undetectable by their victims. Now I wouldn't call chemtrailing undetectable, but no one has detected them that I meet. Very few people understand or know. So many times I walked out of the studio and a few days go by, someone who listened to the show meets me and goes, "What were you talking about with those chemtrails? What is that?" They don't even look up. Because they're there every day. They're not commercial jets. They're spraying the atmosphere. You can understand, the usefulness of these kinds of secret weapons. The report from Iron Mountain, which was written in the early 60s, again, supposedly by U.S. government think tanks, but was really just another Illuminati-controlled agency to get the word out, to spread the lie, laying out all the reasons and uses for the global warming hoax. Drawing on George Orwell's 1984 book, it suggested that warfare and poverty were essential to the preservation of the ruling elite. In the book 1984, when there was no real warfare going on, an environmental catastrophe was used as a substitute. You see, the effects they both have on people are very similar. First, they're displaced, right? They're moved. They're without any belongings. They end up having to rely on the elite rich who control the government to aid them. They become refugees in their own country. How many refugees have we got leaving Florida right now? Which leaves them totally helpless, totally confused, and of course, easy to control and manipulate. Remember, Hurricane Irma, hyped up to be on the Illuminati-controlled mass media as the largest mass evacuation in Floridian history. After earthquakes and tidal waves, the population aren't the same human beings they once were. They become easier to handle, easier to manage, brainwashed, easier for the Illuminati to rule. They basically become slaves to the desires of the elite, and they become satisfied with less. In the past 5 years or so, force of nature, earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, flooding, have rarely been out of the news cycle. The global warming hoax was their cover-up, the reason for it all. Remember the Southeast Asian tsunami covered here, and all the hurricanes culminating in the evacuation of many countries in the past few years, all part of the global brainwashing that's being directed at all citizens on the planet. Hey, the disruption of the U.S. oil supply by hurricanes was even the subject of a television docudrama called Oil Storm, broadcast only a few months in 2005 before Hurricane Katrina struck. Timing? Coincidental? There's no such thing as coincidence. I told you all about that and more on AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640 when I did those shows on Katrina, the deadliest hurricane all time. You know, Plato wrote the first account of this ancient civilization in the 4th century BC. Quote, Poseidon, god of the sea, ruler of Atlantis, sired 5 pairs of male twins with mortal women. Poseidon appointed the eldest of these sons, Atlas the Titan, ruler of his beautiful island domain. Atlas became the personification of the mountains or pillars that held up the sky. The Greek word Atlantis means the island of Atlas. just as the word Atlantic, where all these storms are concocted, means the ocean of Atlas. The firstborn Atlas of Poseidon, the god of the sea. Notice the water kings that I constantly remind you of that rule us, had the continent and the surrounding ocean named for him. Poseidon divided the land into 10 sections, each to be ruled by a son or his heirs. This is where we're going back to the age of Atlantis. The world in this new world order will be broken up to exactly that 10 sections. Each area pitted against one another for an all-out trade war. The capital city of Atlantis was a supposedly marvelous piece of architecture and engineering. The city, composed of a series of concentric walls and canals. At the very center was a hill. And on the top of that hill, what else? A temple to the god Poseidon. It's a Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. More on weather control. Yeah, I've taken it back to Atlantis because it's where it began. More next. I'm the guy they call the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. You can email me. It's the only way I communicate besides this radio show. Spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. B.A. writes, the weather terrorists are at it again, Space. They drone on and scare the masses into thinking the worst for every storm. Lines out the door of people buying goods they don't need, but the greedy globalists want to sell. Jacking up gas prices. Can't get plane tickets. They know what they're doing. Where are they after the storms? They ask us to clean up, spend our resources, do their job. No more. No more of this mass media making us into their slaves. I will survive this storm and be ready for the next, regardless of what they want. B.A. from Tampa Bay, Florida. So I told you about the capital of Atlantis, the supposed marvel of architecture and engineering. Concentric walls, circles, and canals. At the very center, a hill. The top of the hill, the temple of Poseidon. Inside, a golden statue of the god of the sea himself, showing him driving 6 winged horses. Remember, one of Poseidon's symbols is the horse. Why? He was the first one to domesticate the horse and use it in battle. It became the modern-day tank. Men riding on an animal so large had never been seen before any time in history. That's where I believe they get that animal that's got a male front and a horse's behind, and basically a man's body, his trunk stuck on a horse's body. That, I believe, was what they saw when they first saw Poseidon attacking, who would load his soldiers onto ships along with the horses and then attack when they disembarked on a new territory. Never been seen before in battle. Men with these great, large bodies. Of course, they were horses. The Acropolis of Atlantis, the site of the city, according to the Illuminati, is 50 miles southeast of Cyprus, where it is located today, at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. It was supposed to have had 5 concentric circles, 3 of water, of sea, and 2 of ground. According to the archaeologists, these rings defined the limits of the water by excavated pits that were canalizing the water that was coming from the skirts of the mount. The same there, says Plato, of the channels that were making a detour to the Acropolis of Atlantis, then to be distributed inside the rings up to the housings, running water. Around 9,000 years before the time of Plato, after the people of Atlantis became corrupt and greedy, the gods decided to destroy them. A violent earthquake shook the land. Giant waves rolled over the shores of Atlantis, and the island sank into the sea, never to be seen again. According to Jewish Kabbalists, Valley Crystal, the New Testament Ark of the Covenant, was an inferior ark and had been modeled after an original Ark of the Covenant in Atlantis. The original Ark represented a covenant between the fallen angels and mankind, she believed. Jewish Kabbalists believe in the Book of Enoch. That is not in the King James Version of the Bible. It has been left out because it is black magic and how to control masses of people. When the Anunnaki first arrived from their home planet, half man, half gods were formed. They brought with them a crucible called an Ark of the Covenant. This ark contained a peculiar pulsating crystal infused with a living light. Under guidance, it emitted rays of force. It was constructed so as to become an instrument, a device, a storehouse, containing the power to generate the very highest creative cosmic frequencies, capable of transforming matter into pure energy force, and energy force into matter again. It was called an Ark of the Covenant because it possessed the potential of harmonizing its divine potencies with the material frequencies of Earth. A covenant of love and peace between the sons of God who brought it and the sons of men who were formed from the Anunnaki's sex with human women, creating the earthborn. This was the manifestation of a promise that the sons of God would never forsake the earthborn sons of men. The covenant was the pledge of eternal guidance and vigilance. The story got worse. In his Atlantis, Plato wrote that the lost continent was located in the Atlantic Ocean. Of course, Atlantis would be. In 1904, a theosophist, William Scott Elliot, proposed that the southern islands of Atlantis were the original homeland of a sub-race of Atlantean sorcerers. Theosophism, by the way, is reaching Godhead, man becoming God through knowledge. You can rule the world through knowledge, and that's what they're doing to you today and I. As to the land of Poseidonus, or Atlantis, as it was called, apparently it consisted originally of either a single large island continent or, according to the theosophist Scott Elliot, of 2 joint islands, the larger being Daitya, and the slightly smaller one being Poseidonus. Together, with a few minor islands, especially on its western side, toward the Mesoamerican subcontinent. The ancient kingdom of Atlantis had 10 regions. The agenda behind the Templars' discovery of the New World was to recreate, not ultimately a new Jerusalem, but a new Atlantis, also with 10 regions. If this sounds like the global restricting program of the beast described in Bible prophecy, what I call the New World Order, that is precisely what it is. And the 10 horns are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give the power and strength unto the beast. Revelation 17, verses 12 through 13. Spaceman Talk Radio, AM 640. This is AVFS. That's all it is. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Thanks for the one you sent. Appreciate it so much. Thank you again. So, as I was saying, Atlantis, the elites of today want to take us back to the golden age of Atlantis and the blueprint for that Rosicrucian experiment. And that's what it is, to transform this world into their Camelot, which is a code word for the New World Order. No borders, no countries, one globe, one king. Their Rosicrucian experiment to reproduce Atlantis was outlined by Francis Bacon in his 1627 volume of writings. The New Atlantis, it was called, because the Rosicrucians were descendants of the Knights of the Templar, and therefore the centerpiece of this project was, of course, rebuilding the Temple of Solomon. Alas, Ashmole, William Lilly founded a Rosicrucian lodge in London, England, in 1646, just a few years after Francis Bacon, who was in the court of Queen Elizabeth I, the most occult, eccentric ruler that Britain ever had. Now, these two, Ashmole and Lilly, founded the Rosicrucian Lodge, London, on the utopian idea of the creation of this new Atlantis, which symbolized the golden age before the fall, when humanity was spiritually perfect, and the rebuilding of Solomon's temple as revered in the Templar tradition. Ashmole and Lilly were totally influenced by the beliefs of Sir Francis Bacon, who was the Viscount of St. Albans, and wrote the book The New Atlantis, which promoted the Rosicrucian Manifesto. You know who St. Albans is, don't you, and why he became a saint? He was the very first all-time Christian martyr in England. St. Albans. The Necronomicon by Abdul al-Azred, a mad poet of Sana'a, as he's known in Yemen. It is a book of dead names about the ancient demigods of Atlantis who were drowned in the great deluge, the flood. This original Necronomicon disclosed that the wicked angels taught humans how to control the natural elements. Also revealed was their ulterior motive, revenge. As Abdul, the writer of the Necronomicon, stated, civilizations were destroyed because of the knowledge contained in that book. This is the deed that must be avenged, the memory of which sleeps in the blood of their human offspring, just as they sleep beneath the earth, waiting for the day that the stars will be right again, and their descendants will perform the rites which will bring them up from the depths to reclaim their kingdom, and the age of the gods will begin anew. The new Atlantis, the new Jerusalem, the new world order. To avenge their deaths, the Atlanteans would to instruct humans how to call forth their spirits from the dead. And in the process, these chaotic spirits would wreak havoc on the earth. This explains why the alchemical science of weather control was seriously studied during the 18th century Rosicrucian Enlightenment time, when they shifted from the Bible as the only truth to black magic, man is God. The Rosicrucian Enlightenment, man can become God through knowledge. According to Spiritual Politics, changing the world from the inside out, a sect of English Druids called the Dragons, which also included Sir Walter Raleigh, by the way, and John Dee, the occultist of occultists, and Queen Elizabeth I's court. John Dee, by the way, was the eyes and ears, listening and watching all the courtiers that were involved with Queen Elizabeth I. And he was the very first James Bond who had a license to kill anyone who spoke against or tried to challenge Queen Elizabeth I in any of her proclamations. He was a famous British magician, mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, geographer, occultist, and consultant to Queen Elizabeth I. He also devoted a lot of his life to alchemy, divination, Hermetic philosophy. The goals of both these highly influential men was to renew the ancient wisdom of earth energies. John Dee, who was also a Rosicrucian Grand Master, wrote an English version of the Arabic Necronomicon, and the full title truly revealed that weather control conjure up all manner of chaotic spirits. Here's a quote from that very book, the Necronomicon, written by John Dee. Grimorium Imperium, or the Book of the Law and Practices of the Sleeping Dead, learned by John Dee from the works of Abd al-Hazred, including the conjuration of all manner of chaotic spirits, secret seals and talisman, the truth of the old spirits and the ultimate keys of life and death and the universe. A show on AVFS, Talk Radio AM 640, a while ago. I believe it was last week I covered it. The Merovingian signature of the hurricanes. Yeah, I did that last week. Presented evidence that mankind has developed the technology to control weather, and that the Illuminati is presently using this technology to convince us all of climate change. To demonstrate that precision with the modern weather control, able to control hurricanes, at the same time revealing the identity of their fellow occultists. The path of the hurricane Jean, for instance, 2004, formed a perfect letter P in the Atlantic Ocean on its track. At the time, I thought that P probably stood for Prière, Prière de Sion, the Priory of Sion. Then the very next year, the record-breaking year for hurricanes, 05, a satellite image of Hurricane Wilma showed the letter S in the eye. Weathermen said that this was unusual, but were not surprised. The S was for Sion. The 05 Atlantic hurricane season was the most active Atlantic hurricane season in recorded history, shattering previous records on repeated occasions, and the impact season was devastatingly destructive, with at least 2,280 deaths and record damages of over 100 billion. Now, since been eclipsed, 190 billion, it will cost for Hurricane Harvey. Of the storms that made landfall, 5 of the 7 major hurricanes that year in 2005, Dennis, Emily, Katrina, Rita, Wilma, were responsible for most of the destruction. The Mexican states of Quintana Roo, Yucatan, the U.S. states of Florida, Louisiana, were each struck twice by major hurricanes. Cuba, the Bahamas, Haiti, Mississippi, Texas, Tamaulipas were each struck once. In each case, brushed by at least one more. A record 28 tropical and subtropical storms actually formed. A record 15 became hurricanes. 7 of them strengthened to major hurricanes, tying a record of 5 became 4 Category 4 hurricanes, and a record 4 reached Category 5 strength. The highest categorization of hurricanes, of course, 5, were Hurricanes Katrina, Wilma, the most intense Atlantic hurricane season on record, 05. It's the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio AM 640. There's more right after this. I'm the guy to call a Spaceman. This is Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. I'm going to call him Mr. C. He says, I'm a French-Canadian living in Tonga. Now, if you don't know where Tonga is, that's in the South Pacific Ocean, a little island. I don't normally subscribe to borders and how governments try to define us. But I'm glad I'm not an American. They shift the focus all the time. Makes no sense. They seem to be chaotic at best. And we all need to step back and focus on the real truths. Mr. C. Tonga. So weather controlling technology, and living in Tonga in the South Pacific, I would imagine he's seen quite a lot. Weather controlling technology is also displayed in video games if you don't live in places like Tonga where you can actually live it. Displayed in a video game? Yeah, here's the description. Druids taken, angel and shadows. Ones with nature. They're not formidable in healing or offensive magic, but they're capable of summoning beasts to their side, and sometimes altering weather at their command. They also have some healing magics and are enabling to summon spirit weapons instead of being allowed to be equipped with weapons. A lot of them are hand-to-hand fighters and use martial arts skills. They're marvelous fighters, and once they upgrade, they become even more formidable in this game. They upgrade to the werewolf class and the weathermancer class. The Rosicrucian delusion of Godhead extends far beyond weather control, you know, to the total manipulation and transformation of nature. According to Professor Amerio Romano of the Academy of Lugano, Switzerland, medieval alchemy or magic evolved into modern technology. Nowhere is the Atlantean injunction and belief system more apparent than in genetic engineering. A devoted admirer of the Atlanteans was a philosopher. I've just talked about him, Francis Bacon, who's alleged by historians of the occult with having sent to America, soon after the Pilgrims arrived, a contingent of his brotherhood who would reconstruct the new Atlantis on the new continent, which became the United States and Canada and Mexico. The plan was to build America into the world superpower that it is now, then have her burn up. Out of the ashes would rise the new world order, the one world government. It's the story I tell. I didn't make it up. It's from Sir Francis Bacon. The book is New Atlantis. It's the story phoenix. Out of the ashes rise up its reincarnation. Here's something written by Mario Romano in his book Iota Unum, a study of the changes in the Catholic Church since Vatican II. In that book, he revealed the convergence of genetic engineering, as well as Sir Francis Bacon and the Rosicrucian dreams of Atlantis. Here's a quote. It's generally recognized that the ruling principle of contemporary society is technology, seen as a means of control, transforming nature. It's Bacon's principle of the extension of the limits of human control to the maximum possible, with technology at the forefront. When technology was first developed out of magic, leaving its chrysalis behind, Bacon and Campanella set their sights on artificially producing rain, constructing flying machines. Are you ready? Changes of sex, new species of plants, and synthetic substances that would satisfy hunger and thirst. Genetically modified food is what's meant. The only thing that they did not propose to produce mechanically was man, since they had seen that even a machine with the appearance of consciousness would still be only a machine. Today they have AI. Modern technology has realized these fantasies of the Renaissance period. The fact that rain was artificially produced during the Vietnam War, way back then, to block the Ho Chi Minh Trail is recognized by the Treaty of May 1977 between the USA and USSR, banning meteorological warfare. Thanks to the limitless growth of atomic power, though, artificial earthquakes are now a possibility, as is the colonization of the moon, contemplated by Kepler. It would only require a further change in degree rather than in kind to alter the axis of the Earth and change climatic zones. So realizing Dante's hypothesis, which was, the greater the departure from the vertical, the more the arrangement of the Earth would move up or down. Weather manipulation warfare has been taken to a new sophistication. It's now being deployed against you and I to convince you of climate change. Researchers are planning use of space to manipulate the weather of the Earth. Measures and countermeasures mark the advanced war games that are being played. The technology involves manipulation of the ionosphere. The advanced techniques involve application of artificial electromagnetic field intensities. For example, a cyclone can be created by these methods, but the challenge lies in guiding the cyclone or typhoon or hurricane to its target in the warfare. For that, scientists are using high-powered laser beams aimed at the eye of the cyclone and dragging it to the desired path. This is all done right now from the International Space Station. The man who did the laser guiding in concert with High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, or HAARP, was Sergei Konstantinovich Krikalev. Now, Sergei happens to hold the current known record for time travel by a human being in space. He's a Russian cosmonaut, veteran of 6 space flights. He's been nicknamed the last Soviet citizen, as in 1991-92 he spent 311 days, 20 hours and 1 minute aboard the Mir space station. Whilst back on Earth, the Soviet Union actually collapsed when he was in space. Sergei Avgiev had the previous record But in August of that hurricane record-breaking year, 2005, this record was surpassed by Sergei Krikalev. By the way, Krikalev and Robert Cabana become the first people to ever enter the ISS in December of 1998 when they turn on the lights in the U.S. module. Artificial manipulation of the ionosphere can create massive cyclones and typhoons, they know now, but the mere use of the ionosphere can only create the seed. The application of electromagnetic flux and creating a temperature differential is what makes a cyclone so menacing. They're saying, the Illuminati-controlled mass media, that, it's the warm water. For the want of a better term, poppycock. It's done electromagnetically, guiding the cyclones or hurricanes. It's how they're manipulated. They turned Irma on Florida. They knew exactly when it was going to make that turn to the west. We're now experiencing weather manipulation warfare from outer space. Satellites being used for this job too. There's artificial manipulation of Earth's ionosphere and magnetosphere, and the creation and application of targeted pinpoint electromagnetic flux. The storms can be accurately controlled or decontrolled. Environmental warfare is defined as the international modification or manipulation of the natural ecology, such as climate and weather. Earth systems like the ionosphere, magnetosphere, the tectonic plate system, for the triggering of seismic events, earthquakes, to cause intentional physical, economic, and psychosocial and physical destruction to an intended target. It's all part of the strategic tactical war that we're involved in as this transformation of the Earth is taking place to the New World Order. Space, Talk Radio, AM 640, with more after the break. It's the AVS on the Spaceman's Talk Radio, AM 640. Please, emails, direct them to space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. DD writes, hey, Spaceman, I'm listening from coastal Georgia right now as a mandatory evacuation zone for Irma. And the storm has shifted west, so it doesn't look too bad for us here in Georgia. Now, he also asked me for some links to learn more about weather manipulation. So what are the underlying causes of extreme weather instability, as the Illuminati-controlled mass media has been grilling us on, which has ravaged every major region in the world in the course of the last few years? So a study released by the World Meteorological Organization places the blame, without further examination and research, on climate change. Yeah. The job selling this was given to Al Gore, of course, right after he lost the recounted election to George W. Bush, December 13th, 2000. The significant expansion of America's weather warfare arsenal. It's a priority of the Department of Defense. It's never talked about or never discussed. Ever hear Al Gore talking about weather manipulation with global warming or climate change as it's known today? Why can't they use weather manipulation to tame these storms down then? No, he never talks about that. Because it's used to ramp them up. Because climate change is a hoax. The manipulation of weather patterns for military use is never mentioned. Only on a show like this you will ever hear it. While there's no firm evidence that the U.S. Air Force weather warfare facilities have been deliberately applied to modify weather patterns, you'd expect that if these capabilities are being developed for military use, they would at least be the object of routine testing, much in the same way as the testing of a new conventional or strategic weapon system. But needless to say, the subject matter is a scientific taboo. The possibility of climate or environmental manipulation as part of a military and intelligence agenda, while tacitly acknowledged, is never considered as relevant. Military analysts are mute, silent on that subject. Meteorologists are not investigating it either. And environmentalists are strung out on global warming, climate change, and the Paris Accord. Meteorologists, by the way, let me just talk about that for a second. Many listeners to AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640 have called places like, the Weather Network and other meteorological establishments asking about the chemtrails. And they don't even acknowledge their existence. They tell you they're commercial airplanes. Don't worry about it. Those are the meteorologists. Your weather prognosticators. The High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, HAARP, it's based in Gokona, Alaska, has been operational since 1982. It's part of a new generation of sophisticated weaponry under the U.S. Strategic Defense Initiative, operated by the U.S. Air Force Research Laboratory's Space Vehicles Directorate. HAARP is a system of powerful antennas capable of creating controlled local modifications of the ionosphere. That's the upper layer of our atmosphere. This is off the HAARP website. HAARP is used to induce a small, localized change in ionospheric temperature so that resulting physical reactions can be studied by other instruments located either at or close to the HAARP site. Nicholas Begich, actively involved in the public campaign against HAARP, described HAARP this way: a super powerful radioactive beaming technology that lifts areas of the ionosphere by focusing a beam and heating those areas. Electromagnetic waves then bounce back onto Earth and penetrate everything, living and dead. World-renowned scientist Dr. Rosalie Bertell depicted HAARP as a gigantic heater that can cause major disruptions in the ionosphere, creating not just holes, but long incisions in the protective layer that keeps deadly radiation from bombarding our planet. According to Richard Williams, a physicist and consultant to the David Sarnoff laboratory in Princeton, that's Marconi, RCA, old times, HAARP constitutes an irresponsible act of global vandalism, he said, and he fears a secret second stage where HAARP would beam much more energy into the ionosphere that could actually produce super severe disruptions in the upper atmosphere at one location that may produce effects that spread rapidly around the Earth for years. HAARP has been presented to the public as as a program of scientific and academic research. U.S. military documents state that HAARP's main objective is to exploit the ionosphere for the Department of Defense purposes. Without explicitly referring to the HAARP program, a U.S. Air Force study actually points to the induced ionospheric modifications as a means of altering weather patterns as well as disrupting enemy communications and their radar. HAARP also has the capability of triggering blackouts, disrupting the electrical power grid system of entire regions here on Earth. I told you the truth here on this show, Talk Radio AM 640, A View from Space. I told you the truth about the secret military experiment that was the cause of the great blackout of 03 that we went through that hit us on August 14th. 03. On that day, just a few minutes after the stock market closed for the day, a 9-minute event had brought the entire Northeast power grid down. I'm talking about the Northeast of North America. It's believed that over 50 million people lost power that afternoon. Since this unprecedented event, blame games flew back and forth, of course, but no real answers ever were provided. It's believed that the event originated in an area in eastern U.S. and the Midwest. But what caused that mess? August 14, 2003, the Great Blackout. Outdated equipment, irresponsible power companies, and politicians have all been blaming everyone else without any solid evidence to support any of their accusations. In other words, typical political smokescreens put up. What has never been suggested, except on this show, is the possibility that this was a secret government test that served the purpose of fulfilling requirements for sophisticated warfare and security response mechanisms. They know how to shut down power for 50 million at a moment's notice. And if they ever need to, they will damn well use it. There's more on the other side of the break. This is a talk radio show called AVFS, and it's on AM 640. It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640 and A View from Space. Emails, please send them to one of two addresses, spaceman at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. Let me call this person SJ. First time sending a question, listens all the time. I try to always catch this show from what others say is the best seat in the house, in front of my computer. I've heard your thoughts on various topics and was curious to know how you feel about the distractions that the governments seem to love. When the spotlight is on them, they fight between themselves, but when massive weather events are coming, they seem to scatter and try to blame others. What gives? All the best. Keep it up, please. SJ, Seattle, Washington. Here's one, let me call him MY. This is Spaceman. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Otherwise, it just continues to be a theory. And I'm delivering that tonight. In spades. Weather warfare is a corporate bonanza. HAARP has been operational since the early 90s. The system of antennas at Gakona, Alaska, initiated on a technology patented by Advanced Power Technologies Incorporated. APTI, I believe, on the ticker. A subsidiary of Atlantic Richfield Corporation, ARCO. The first phase of the HAARP ionosphere research instrument was completed by Advanced Power Technologies. The Ionospheric Research Instrument System of antennas was first installed in 1992 by a subsidiary of British Aerospace Systems, better known as BAE, using the Advanced Power Technologies Incorporated patent. By the way, small world we live in, isn't it? Canada's Minister of Defence at one time was Gordon O'Connor, who was a former employee of BAE Systems. The antennas beam into the outer atmosphere using a set of wireless high-frequency transmitters. In 1994, Atlantic Richfield Company sold its Advanced Power Technological subsidiary, including the patents and the second phase construction contract to E-Systems. E-Systems is a secretive, high-tech military outfit with links to the CIA. E-Systems, after my research, I found out they specialize in the production of electronic warfare equipment, navigation equipment, and reconnaissance machinery, including highly sophisticated spying devices. I wonder if E-Systems is doing all the hacking for the CIA. And this latest hack for Equifax, they're going to continue because it's a way of an economic punch in the gut to the average little guy who is, after all, the target of all that I talk about. E-Systems is one of the biggest intelligence contractors in the world. It's doing work for the CIA. Other defense intelligence organizations and others got about $1.8 billion to their annual sales, with about $800 million for black projects, so secret that even the United States Congress isn't told how the money's been spent. The company has outfitted military projects like the Doomsday Plan. You've heard of that? That's a system that allows the President of the United States to manage a nuclear war in operational situations like, you recall Operation Desert Storm in Iraq? With the purchase of APTI, E-Systems, the secretively high-tech military outfit, acquired the strategic weather warfare technology and patent rights, including Bernard Eastlund's method and apparatus for altering a region of the Earth's atmosphere, ionosphere, and the magnetosphere. It's worth mentioning that the Eastlund APTI patents were based on the research of Yugoslav scientist Nikola Tesla, of which, of course, Elon Musk named his company the sun-worshipping high priest of self-driving, battery-operated cars. And Yugoslavia, by the way, doesn't exist anymore. But it came from the Yugoslav scientist Nikola Tesla, a lot of whose ideas were stolen by U.S. corporations. Eastlund described this deadly technology as capable of causing total disruption of communications over a very large portion of the Earth, missile or aircraft destruction, deflection or confusion, weather modification. Not surprisingly, the patent had previously been sealed under a government secrecy order. Barely a year following the E-Systems purchase of APTI's weather warfare technology, E-Systems was brought out by Raytheon, the fourth largest U.S. military contractor. Through this money-spinning acquisition, Raytheon became the largest defense electronics firm in the world. Meanwhile, Arco, the Atlantic Richfield Corporation, which sold APTI to E-Systems, was acquired by the BP Amoco Oil Consortium. That deal brought in the largest oil company in the world, British Petroleum. the BP part of Amoco. Raytheon, through its E-Systems subsidiary, now owns the patents used to develop the HARP weather warfare facility at Gakona, Alaska. Raytheon is also involved in other areas of weather research for military purposes, including the activities of its subsidiary in Antarctica, South Pole. Raytheon Polar Services, it's called. Serving who? Serving the elite. You know what their motto is? Owning the weather towards the final expanded stage. The HARP antenna array transmitters were slated to be built in several distinct phases. First, development prototype, the filled DP, then the limited IRI, and then the full-size or final HARP array. It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. If you want more on weather manipulation and concrete facts, not a theory, they're next. It's a view from space. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm the Spaceman. Please send your correspondence to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. So the HARP antenna array and transmitter system were slated to be built in several distinct phases. First, developmental prototype, then the filled developmental prototype, and then the limited IRI, and then the full size, the final IRA. Now, during the Clinton administration, the filled developmental prototype, namely a system composed of an array of 48 active antenna elements with connected wireless transmitters, was installed and completed at the HARP facility in 1994 in Alaska. Under the initial development prototype, only 18 of the 48 transmitters were actually connected. And Bernard Eastland, in 1997, did an interview describing this antenna array in its filled stage, in its developmental prototype filled stage, the second step in the program. We are now through the four. He said, the system of 48 antennas, while fully operational, was not, according to Eastland, powerful enough, that was back in 1997, to bring the ideas in his patents to fruition. In other words, not powerful enough to do exactly the job that they wanted it to do. But they were getting up there, he said. That was in 1997. It's a very powerful device, he said, especially if they go to the expanded stage, which is the final size or the final IRI, which is where we have arrived today, and you're seeing the results. This final expanded stage, envisioned by Eastland, Bernard Eastland, which gave it maximum capability to manipulate the world's weather patterns, is now operational. Under George W. Bush, the main partner of the Raytheon, which owns the patents in that construction and developmental stage of the HARP antenna array, is a British company, the British Aerospace Systems Company, which was involved in the initial installation of the antenna array way back in the early 90s. The multi-million-dollar contract was granted by the Office of Naval Research at BAES. That's the British Aerospace Systems. Okay. See, the British are behind the economic woes and the weather manipulation. In other words, they are the brains. Through this, and power and money, through this U.S. subsidiary, BAE Systems, Advanced Technologies Incorporated, the contract was signed barely a couple of months before the Anglo-American invasion of Iraq. Using Raytheon's technology, the British company BAES was to develop the HARP ionospheric research instrument, the IRI, to its maximum capabilities of full size, as I was saying. In April of 2003, BAE Systems Advanced Technologies outsourced the production and installation of that antennas array to Phasar Corp. That's a company specializing in advanced wireless antennas for military use only. Phasar owns Antenna Products Corporation of Mineral Wells, Texas. George W. Bush estate. Phasar was entrusted with producing and installing 132 crossed dipole antenna items for the HARP facility. A year later, in April of 2004, that final phase of that expansion of the HARP facility was launched. That phase consisted of equipment of all 180 completed antennas with high-frequency transmitters. BAE Systems was awarded another lucrative contract this time. In July of 2004, Phasar had developed and installed the 132 crossed dipole antennas, including the antenna support structures and ground screen items at the HARP facility, bringing the number of antennas to a total of 48 under the FDP stage, to 180, the final one. I believe that's what they have today, 180 antennas, which can really create a lot of ULF, electromagnetic wave frequencies. Also, BAE Systems had contracted with Jersey-based defense electronics firm DRS Technologies. In an $11.5 million outsourcing arrangement, that production and installation of the high-frequency radio transmitters for the HARP antenna array. DRS specialized in a variety of leading-edge products for the U.S. military and intelligence agencies. So under its contract with BAE Systems, Information and Electronic Warfare Systems in Washington, DRS was to manufacture and install more than 60 model D6 16G 10 kilowatt dual transmitters to be used with a HARP system of antennas. Now, it's not exactly clear from the company's statements whether all those 180 antennas were equipped with a transmitter, but I believe they were, which would bring that system up to full capability at HARP. It has been for quite a while. Deliveries and installation were completed in July of 2006, while HARP was described as a research project. The production of the transmitters was entrusted to DRS C-41 Command Control Communications, Computers and Intelligence Group. A report published by the Russian Parliament, the Duma, in 2002 said that the U.S. military had plans to test its weather modification techniques at its Alaska facility as well as a couple of other sites. The committees reported that the U.S. was planning to test 3 facilities of that kind, one of them located in the military testing ground in Alaska at Gononka, and its full-scale tests began in 2003. The second one was in Greenland, and the third, Norway. So they have them all over the world because they're global. When these facilities were launched into space from Norway, Alaska, and Greenland, a closed contour was created with a truly fantastic integral potential for influencing the near-Earth medium. So said the Russian Duma. The U.S. planned to carry out large-scale scientific experiments under the HARP program, not controlled by the global community, and would supposedly create weapons capable of breaking radio transmission lines, equipment installed, or spaceships and rockets, provoke serious accidents in electrical networks. For example, the Great Blackout of 2003. It could also provoke serious accidents in oil and gas pipeline delivery systems and have a negative impact on the mental health of people populating entire regions. Whether this report by the Russian Duma on testing starting in early 2003 was correct or not, the U.S. administration has to be confronted nationally and internationally at the political and diplomatic levels at the UN to stop it. And do you think that's going to happen? No, because the UN is the body that is the future one world government. Right now there's 193 nations. Soon all will be enveloped in a global parliamentary system with one leader. What's more, to wage an effective campaign, it's essential that corroborating scientists with other scientists, scientific investigations of the unusual weather occurrence observed in recent years, particularly since 2003, could be undertaken. This investigation would be far-reaching, collecting relevant data, correlating specific weather occurrences to record antenna activity at Alaska's site, as well as the two other sites in Norway and Greenland. But do you think that will ever happen? The ones that are doing the ordering of these inquiries are the ones running the show. Space, back with more following this break. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com if you've got a query or if you've got a critique of the show, or if you'd just like to say where in the world you're listening to AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640 from, or spaceman at 640toronto.com. Two addresses, and thank you so much for the one that you've sent. So this full-size ionospheric research instrument at Konoka in Alaska and in Greenland and in Norway are now complete, each with a maximum size of 180 antenna elements, as far as I understand, arranged in 15 columns by 12 rows, completed a while ago. So now they have the ability to selectively modify for military use and other purposes like convincing the world of climate change to affect weather patterns anywhere in the world. The unusual climatic occurrences in the U.S., Western Europe, and the whole globe really have been extensively documented. But what the Illuminati-controlled mass media never, ever touches on is that a number of unusual and dramatic climactic changes have occurred in recent years in countries which are identified as possible targets under HAARP's preemptive war doctrine. Now, weather patterns in North Korea, for instance, the home of Kim Jong-un, have been marked since the mid-90s by a succession of droughts, followed by floods. The result has been the destruction of an entire agricultural system. You didn't know about that, did you? In Cuba, the pattern is very similar to that of North Korea. In Iraq, Iran, Syria, devastating drought occurred in 1999. In Afghanistan, 4 years of drought in the years preceding the U.S.-led invasion in 2001. They have led to the destruction of the peasant economy, leading to widespread famine. While there's no proof that these weather occurrences are the result of climactic warfare, Phillips Geophysics Lab, which is a partner of the HAARP project, provides a course for military personnel in the Hanscom Air Force Base in Maryland on weather modification techniques. The course outline explicitly contemplates the triggering of storms, hurricanes, for military use. Weather manipulation is the preemptive weapon par excellence. It can be directed against any enemy countries or even friendly nations. They're using it against you and I today without our knowledge. Weather warfare constitutes a covert form of preemptive war. The manipulation of climate can be used to destabilize an enemy's economy, the ecosystem, the agricultural system, like was done in North Korea and Cuba. Needless to say, it can trigger havoc in financial and commodity markets and can potentially be used as an instrument of insider trades for financial gain. It has the ability of destabilizing a country's institutions, and the disruption in agriculture creates a great dependency on food aid, genetically modified food, GMO. The U.S. government under George W. Bush, his administration, stated that it reserved the right to attack countries preemptively with a view to ensuring the security of the American homeland. In other words, they could be disrupting us. We can go in and give them a black eye. Washington, as part of its nuclear posture review, has threatened several countries, including China, Russia, in the past, with preemptive nuclear strikes. One would assume that the same targeting of rogue states exists with, respect to all, and the use of weather modification techniques also. The latest threat for a preemptive nuclear strike, North Korea, just weeks ago. While there's no evidence of the use of weather warfare against rogue states, the policy guidelines on weather intervention techniques have already been established, and the technology is fully operational. So I have to say, if they've got it, they use it. What do you think they've built it? The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration used the KC-135A to do their chemtrail spraying. It's used by NASA to conduct zero-gravity testing and experiments for their astronauts. This is the aircraft seen in the skies above your town. Here's some of the chemicals they're spraying in your air. They're iodide-based complex multi-component aerosol compositions. The compositions are made up of a solid mass formed by a compacted mixture of silver iodide. Now, the silver iodide reflects sunlight, reflects HARP rays from those antennas I've been talking about, and heats the air. You see, you can't heat air, you have to put something in it. That's why the spray. So silver iodide is one. And the iodides and periodates of alkali metals, lead, copper, barium, ammonia, barium chromate, also contains certain oxidizers like ammonium perchlorate, and even fuels like polyphenylene, phenol formaldehyde resin, epoxide resin, and shellac. Now, the lead, of course, known as a carcinogen, causes cancer, a developmental toxicant and reproductive toxicant. Lead is a suspected cardiovascular or blood toxicant too. Endocrine toxicant, gastrointestinal toxicant, Also an immunotoxicant, kidney toxicant, neurotoxicant for your brain, respiratory toxicant for your lungs, skin, lead is ranked as one of the most hazardous compounds to human health and to ecosystems. You got lead in your water? You can't drink it. What's also in that spray is copper, a suspected cardiovascular or blood toxicant, a developmental toxicant, gastrointestinal again, and a liver toxicant. Reproductive, respiratory toxicant, too. Also ranked as one of the most hazardous compounds to human health. It makes you think, if you wear one of those copper bracelets, supposed to be good for you and your health, I wonder what you're really doing. Barium is another ingredient in those chemtrails you see. It's a developmental toxicant as well as a neurotoxicant and a respiratory one. There's ammonia in it, a suspected gastrointestinal again, liver, neuro, respiratory toxicant, also a toxicant for your skin. It's one of the worst, ammonia, ecosystem toxicants available. Barium chromate is in there too. It's a known carcinogen. Again, cancer causing. There's sulfur there. It's hard on the skin, the eyes. The respiratory system gets irritated. Pulmonary function can be reduced. Tracheobronchitis is a frequent occurrence. Chronic bronchitis. Chronic sinus effects. Bronchopulmonary disease can occur too, complicated by emphysema. Asthma, of course, a frequent complication. And you know what they say today? Oh, it must be a high pollen season. All right. Xylene. You know what xylene is? It's a shellac. It causes skin irritation. Eyes, nose, and throat are bothered. Difficulty in breathing. Impaired function of the lungs. Delayed response to a visual stimulus, or even impaired memory if enough is ingested. Ferric chloride's in there too. This compound is a strong irritant to your skin and tissue. When it's heated to decomposition, it emits highly toxic fumes, which reacts with water to produce toxic and corrosive fumes. Symptoms, if you inhale it, include wheezing, coughing, shortness of breath even, or burning in the mouth, burning in the throat, or you're burning in your chest. An immunotoxicant is also in those chem clouds. Phenol formaldehyde resin. It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. I continue with this next. This is AVFS. It's the name of the show. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm the Spaceman. Emails to space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. If you care to join in, the people that do, contact me weekly. And if you do, I thank you so much. What you and I, have been witnessing in these last 15 to 20 years is the ascendancy of the scientific dictatorship, the elite's religious power structure, turning the world into a technocratic oligarchy legitimized by the occult and science action that they're causing. The history and background of this occult scientific dictatorship is the conspiracy. and is being created and micromanaged by the basic foundations of Darwinism, which has its beginnings in Freemasonry, taking you back to the seat and home, England. They are reinventing reality itself. Aldous Huxley, who was a Freemason, coined the term scientific dictatorship himself and wrote about in his now famous book, Brave New World. Huxley was guided, taught by another Freemason, H.G. Wells, who also presented a fictionalized scientific dictatorship under the name technocracy. Isn't that an interesting word chosen for a one-world government managed by the elite rich and scientists / black magicians? The word technocracy actually comes from the Greek word techne, meaning craft. Knowing now that Wells was a member of the craft of Freemasonry, it follows that he'd name it that. The word craft, by the way, also associated with witchcraft. From the word Wicca, you get the word wicker. Looking into the meaning of this word a little deeper, the word wicker has a few connotations. One of them is to bend, as in the bending of reality, the bending of sexuality. This is especially interesting when you consider the words of Mark Peach, co-inventor of the virtual reality modeling language. Peach writes, "The enduring archetype of techne within the pre-modern era is magic of an environment that conforms entirely to the will of being." The word techne is also where we get the word technology from. That is, disrupting everyone's life so heavily, so greatly. Science or knowledge becomes the instrument by which the Illuminati resculpts reality. It also becomes a weapon of knowledge against the minds of men. This was the central idea of Adam Weishaupt's Illuminati and the conceit of the technocracy of today. It's not surprising that science fiction writer and British intelligence asset Arthur C. Clarke once said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." He was bang on with that. The British intelligence operative Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. The plan for the Illuminati to alter human evolution by combining what we know of nanotechnology, biotechnology, IT, and cognitive sciences. It's all in a 405-page book sponsored by the United States National Science Foundation and Commerce Department, Converging Technologies for Improving Human Performance. It calls for a broad-based research program to improve human performance, leading to, you ready? Telepathy. Communication with a person without speaking, putting a thought into another person's mind. Other areas they want to get into is machine-to-human communication. Siri, what is blah, blah, blah? Watson, what is the future capability of our phone system maintenance. Alexa, order this from eBay. Get me? Machine-to-human communication. Amplified personal sensory devices. Enhanced intellectual capacities. Is what they really have in mind. It goes even deeper, and I brought it up a few times on this show. I'll get to it in a second. Elaborating on this research program, Cochrane explained how this convergent technologies plan would be instrumental in the unification of mass consciousness, making everyone one, all having the same thoughts, no individualism. Here it is. People may download their consciousnesses into computers or other bodies, even on the other side of the solar system, or participate in a giant hive mind, a network of intelligences connected through ultra-fast communication networks, with knowledge no longer encapsulated in individuals. The distinction between individuals and the entirety of humanity would blur. Think. Here's where your Star Trek memory kicks in and programming. Think Vulcan mind meld. It would all make us more of a hive mind. An enormous, single intelligence entity. Mankind. Wow. Of course, preparations must be made for the humanity's comfortable acclimation of this new hive mind. Now, when I said earlier that the Illuminati are using chaos to create change, change to what? Change to the completely new system of the business sector, in government, which is what they call, not my words, theirs, a new world order. It's to be done through an alchemical transformation that we're being put through right now, this minute, via technology. Here's why. The elite, our leaders, the movers and shakers of this world, the ones who make all the big decisions on where we are all going on planet Earth and what kind of a world it'll be shaped as, are sun worshippers. They believe in the goddess Gaia and are invoking the aid of this deity, this spirit, as they see her. You see, Gaia herself, which is supposedly Earth, having its own spirit, a living, breathing, thinking spirit. Gaia. More on that next on Talk Radio AM 640. Please feel free. Shoot me an email if you got a question or you got a critique of the show, or you just like to say where in the world you're listening to AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640 from. Two addresses, Spaceman at 640toronto.com one, Space at 640toronto.com the other. Gaia is really the first ever Greek god all time. Yes, Gaia was the first ever Greek god. She rose out of chaos. And Gaia is being reborn as the New World Order before your very eyes. Hesiod's Theogony tells the story. It tells how, after chaos, arose the broad-breasted Gaia and the everlasting foundation of the gods of Olympus. In Greek mythology, chaos is the original state of existence from which the first gods appeared. In other words, it is the dark void of space. It is made from a mixture of what the ancient Greeks considered the four elements: earth, water, fire, and air. For example, when a log is burned, the flames are due to the fire in it. The smoke, the air in it, the water and grease comes from it, supposed to be the water, and the ashes left over are the earth. In Greek, it's house or cows. But correctly, in ancient Greece, it means gaping void. She brought forth, did Gaia, Uranus, the starry sky, her equal, to cover her. The hills, the fruitless deep of the sea. Pontus, without sweet union of love, out of her own self, through parthenogenesis. You know what that is? That's asexual form of reproduction found in females, where growth and development of an embryo or seed occurs without fertilization by males. Parthenogenesis is found in nature, in subspecies, lower plants, invertebrates, water fleas, aphids, some bees, some scorpion species, parasitic wasps, vertebrates, some reptiles, fish, and once in a while birds. Sharks, parthenogenesis. And this type of reproduction has been induced artificially in other species. But afterwards, Hesiod tells the story that she lay with her son, has sex with Uranus, and bore the world ocean, Oceanus, Coius, and Creus, and the Titans Hyperion and Iapetus, Thea, Rhea, Themis, Nusamine, Phoebe, of the Golden Crown, and Tethys. After them was born Cronus, the wily youngest and most terrible of her children, and she hated his lusty sire. Hesiod mentions Gaia's other children, too, conceived with Uranus. First, the giant one-eyed Cyclops, Brontes, Stereops, and the bright Argus. Strength and might and craft were in their works. Then he adds the three terrible 300-handed sons of earth and heaven, the Hecatoncirs, Chorus, Brachos, and Gyges, each with 50 heads. Uranus hid these and the Cyclops in Tartarus, so that they would never see the light, rejoicing in this evil doing. This caused pain to Gaia. Tartarus was her bowels, so she created gray flint, or adamantine, and shaped a great flint sickle, gathering together Kronos and his brothers to ask them to obey her. Only Cronus, the youngest, had the daring to take the flint sickle she made and castrate his father as he approached Gaia to have intercourse with her. And from the drops of blood and semen, Gaia bore still more progeny. The strong Erinyes, and the armored Gigantes, and the ash tree nymphs, called the Meliae. From the testicles of Uranus in the sea came forth Aphrodite. For this, a Greek etymologist urged Uranus, called his sons Titans, meaning strainers, because they strained and didn't presumptuously, a fearless deed for which vengeance would come afterwards. Because as Uranus had been deposed by his son, Cronus, so was Cronus destined to be overthrown by Zeus, the son born to him by his sister wife Rhea. In the meantime, the Titans released the Cyclops from Tartarus, and Kronos was awarded the kingship among them, beginning what's known as the Golden Age in Greece. After Uranus's castration, Gaia gives birth to Echnida and Typhon by Tartarus. By Pontus, Gaia birthed the sea deities Nereus, Thaumas, Phorcys, Ceto, and Euryba. Zeus hid Elara, one of his lovers, from Hera, that's his wife, by hiding her under the earth. His son, by Elara, and giant Tityus is therefore sometimes said to be the son of Gaia, the earth goddess, and Elara. Gaia also made Aristeus immortal. Gaia is believed by some sources to be the original deity behind the Oracle of Delphi, the one that, well, told the kings of the future. The great diviner. She passed her powers on to, depending on the source, Poseidon, Apollo, or Themis. Apollo is the best known as the oracle power behind Delphi, long established by the time of Homer, having killed Gaia's child, Python, and usurping the Chthonic power. Hera punishes Apollo for this by sending him to King Admetus as a shepherd for 9 years. Oaths sworn in the name of Gaia in ancient Greece were actually considered the most binding of all. In classical art, Gaia was represented in one of two ways. In Athenian, a vase has her shown as a matronly woman, only half risen from the earth, often in the act of handing the baby Erycthonius, a future king of Athens, by the way, to Athena to bring up. Later, in Mosaic representations, Gaia appeared as a woman reclining upon the earth, surrounded by a host of Carpi. Those are infant gods of the fruits of the earth. It's a Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. Talking about the Illuminati's goddess Gaia, Mother Earth. This is AVFS on Talk Radio, AM 640. It's a Spaceman on. They're available if you want to email me at space640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. PM writes, as the Canadian Prime Minister valiantly says, sunny ways, my friends, sunny ways. Now it makes sense. Sun worship. Sign PM. Now, etymologically, the word Gaia itself, which embodies and encompasses the spirit of the earth, it's a compound word of two elements. Ga, meaning earth, found in a lot of other words too, like geography, writing about earth, geology, words about the earth. Ga is a pre-Greek substrate word that some relate to the Sumerian ki, also meaning earth. Aya is a derivative of an Indo-European stem meaning grandmother. Now, the full meaning of Gaia would then appear to mean grandmother earth. Some sources claim that Gaia was the Mother Earth and a later form of a pre-Indo-European Great Mother who had been venerated in Neolithic times, but at this point, controversial in the academic community. Belief in a nurturing Earth Mother is often a feature of modern neo-pagan goddess worship, which is typically linked to practitioners of this religion in the Neolithic goddess theory. A lot of neo-pagans actively worship Gaia too. Beliefs reflecting Gaia's personality vary, ranging from the common Wiccan belief that Gaia is the earth, or in some cases the spiritual embodiment of the earth, or the goddess of the earth, to the broader neo-pagan belief that Gaia is the goddess of all creation, a mother goddess from which all other gods spring. Gaia, sometimes thought to embody the planets, the earth, and sometimes throughout the embody the entire universe. Worship of Gaia is typically varied too, ranging from prostration to druidic ritual. Unlike Zeus, a roving nomad god in the open sky, Gaia was manifest in small spots: the house, the courtyard, the womb, the cave. Her sacred animals are the serpent, the lunar bull, the pig, the bees. In her hand, the narcotic poppy might be transmitted to a pomegranate. Some of the worship Gaia attempts to get closer to Mother Earth by becoming unconcerned with material things and get more in tune with nature. Others who worship nature recognize Gaia as a great goddess and practice rituals commonly associated with other forms of worship. Sun worship. Many sects worship Gaia. Even more than that, worship Themis, Artemis, and some common forms of worship might even include prostration, attempting to reach a greater connection to the earth. Shamanistic practices too, tithing, praising, and praying, creating inspired works of art dedicated to the goddess, burning oils and incense, rearing plants, gardens, the creation and maintaining of sacred groves. Other forms of worship too are common as worship of Gaia in a very broad way. It can take a lot of different forms, as you can see. Now, the descendants of these Greek gods I've just spoken of claim to be, the Illuminati believe, the ancient royal houses of Europe. Now today, all of those royal houses of Europe are, of course, united into one family. In other words, today's royal family, representing all the royal houses of Europe combined, now united through marriage, are alive and well and living in Buckingham and Kensington palaces in London, England. Last week I was speaking about the royal personages of this particular bloodline, the Merovingian bloodline, where all the names of the hurricanes come from. For instance, Hurricane Harvey. Harvey was the name that was taken from John Hervey, 2nd Baron Hervey, to the British court. He was the Lord Privy Seal during the reign of George II. Voltaire even wrote a poem about his wife, one of the princess's ladies-in-waiting. It's Mary Lapel. The Cat 4 hurricane, which is now a Cat 3 hurricane, the one about to slam into the state of Florida if it's done with Cuba, is named after Princess Irma of Hohenlohe-Langenberg. She's the daughter of Princess Alexandra of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, who was the 4th child and 3rd daughter of Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh, and Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna of Russia. She was a granddaughter of Queen Victoria, too, putting her into the Merovingian bloodline. and of the Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom, as well as the Tsar Alexander II of Russia. Yes, the Merovingian family even claimed to be the bloodline of the royal house of David, the very same bloodline as Jesus Christ. All claimed to be half God, half man. The Merovingian dynasty. The Frankish king, Dagobert II, of the Merovingian dynasty, that he came from, have been romantically mythologized. Local legend and modern mystical pseudo-history, but not many have understood the true meaning and origins of their compelling mystery. The mystique of the Merovingians that surrounds them includes saintliness, magical powers, and even divine origin, stemming from their supposed descent from the one called Jesus Christ. The importance of the divine origin of the Merovingians and the antiquity from whence it comes has never been fully explored by any historian, or any writer for that matter. But there's plenty of evidence which indicates that the origins of the Merovingian race and the mystery that surrounds them lies ultimately with a race of beings called the Nephilim, the fallen angels, who created mankind as we know him today, and with a civilization that goes back before recorded history. All of the major and minor arts and sciences that are basic to civilization and anywhere came from supposedly all of the myths and symbolism of this bloodline that are associated with this dynasty can be traced back to this earlier civilization. It's known in some cultures as Atlantis, as I was speaking about earlier in tonight's show, although there are a lot of names for it. And it is the birthplace of agriculture, astronomy, mathematics, metallurgy, navigation, architecture, language, writing, and religion. It was also the source of the very first government on Earth, monarchy, and the very first kings on Earth were the gods. Actually, people who fooled the population into having the population believing that they were gods with black magic spells. Their races, known as by various names. In Greece, the Anodoti were called. In Sumeria, it was the Anunnaki. And the Celtic lords, the Tuatha De Danann. In the Semitic scriptures, the Torah, Talmud, Old Testament, and other apocryphal texts like the Book of Enoch, they're called the Nephilim, the sons of God, or the Watchers. More next on Talk Radio AM 640. This is AVFS. I'm the guy they call a Spaceman. This is Talk Radio AM 640. You can email me, space640toronto.com, or spaceman at 640toronto.com. Thanks for the one you've sent. M.A. writes, "Hey, Space, strange but true. My son's grade 12 law class was given the usual homework this week. Case scenarios testing a student's social awareness and personal values. Now, the last question on this homework assignment, she said, the last question stunned me. It asked the student if the government made it unlawful to speak against it, and your father was guilty of doing those things at home, would you turn him in? She writes, my son wrote no, but was shocked to find out that 3/4 of his class said yes. My emailer asks, is this info collected by the Illuminati? Thanks again. M.A. It's collected by the school trustees. The school trustees are handpicked by the elites to do the Illuminati's bidding. Pretty stunning, isn't it? How the brainwashing works so well. So, as I said, the Merovingian dynasty, known by various names through history. Merovingian dynasty in France originally, in Germany, in England, in the world, but all through the culture. In Greece, it was the Anodoti. In Sumeria, as I said, the Anunnaki. In Celtic lore, it was the Tuatha De Danann. And in the Semitic scriptures, Torah, Talmud, Old Testament, and other apocryphal texts, like the Book of Enoch, they're called the Nephilim, the sons of God, the Watchers. They're described as having attachments, such as wings, horns, and even fish scales. But from the depictions, it's clear that these are clothes, costumes, worn by these entities, these people, for their symbolic value. Because these symbols indicated divine power and royal blood. The gods themselves had their own monarchy with laws of succession. It's just like today. And they built a global empire upon the earth with great cities, temples, monuments, and mighty nations established on several continents. They created mankind as a slave race to work on their farms and in their gold mines, among other things. The Sumerian legends are very, very clear. Man was made to bear the yoke of the gods. Isn't that what's going on today? It's exactly what's happening. Believe me, nothing's changed. There is nothing new under the blah, blah, blah. Man was separate from the gods, like we're separate from the elites today. We're like a domesticated animal. And it's a great cultural taboo amongst the gods against sharing any of their sacred information with humanity. You and I. Even things like writing and mathematics were very difficult to give to the masses. These gods ruled directly over Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and their rule recorded in all the histories of all three civilizations. This global monarchy was the crowning glory of the ages, and the period of the rule came to be called the Golden Age, or as the Egyptians called it, the first time, when the gods watched over man directly, like a shepherd and his flock. In fact, they were often called the Shepherd Kings. One of the symbols of this worldly monarchy, the Merovingians, was an eye hovering over a throne. And this eye now is on the American dollar bill, presented as the missing capstone of the Great Pyramid of Giza, underneath which is written the words, New World Order. Clearly, this New World Order is the global monarchy. And America's founding fathers intended the U.S. to participate in it all along, symbolized by a pyramid as a representation of the ideal and perfectly ordered authoritarian empire. During the Golden Age of the gods, a new king's ascendance to the global throne would be celebrated by the sacrifice of a horse. To animals sacred to Poseidon, the horse, one of the Atlantean god kings and lord of the seas. In Merovingian mythology, Merovingian King Clovis was buried with a severed horse's head. In fact, There's even a story about how King Sargon's rebellious son Sagara tried to prevent his father's assumption of the world throne from being solidified by stealing his sacrificial horse. The horse was not recovered until years later. Then Sagara, the son, along with the sons of Sagara, whose members of his family who had assisted him were forcefully pushed to dig their own mass grave. This grave? The ocean. It was just a rebellion, just like this, that led to the downfall of the entire empire. At some point, it said, some of the gods broke rank. This is again recorded in just about every culture on Earth that has a written or oral history of legends. Some of the gods, finding human females most appealing, intermarried with them, breaking, of course, a major taboo with their own culture, creating and having sex with a human, gave birth to a hybrid. A human/god hybrid, half man, half human. Some of these offspring are descended and described as having taken the form of giants, dragons, sea monsters. Others are said to have been a normal human countenance, with the exception of their shining, shimmering white skin and their extremely long lifespans. This is the bloodline that supposedly brought us Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, King David, Jesus Christ, and a lot of others. In other words, the Grail bloodline. Legend has it that these beings taught mankind their secrets, their black magic, including the arts of civilization, as well as secret spiritual doctrine that only certain elect humans, their bloodline descendants, would be allowed to possess. They created ritualistic mystery schools and secret societies to pass this doctrine down through the generations, keeping it in the families at all times. That's what the universities are really about. I mean, all the top-line universities and all of the fraternities and secret societies that go along with them. But their pursuit and practice of black magic, this sparked the massive and devastating battle that has come down to us in the legends of both the war in heaven and the deluge, the flood. Then, in order to cleanse the earth's surface of this curse of humanity, it was covered with water, a flood. Interestingly, this flood is mentioned in the legends of almost every ancient culture on Earth, and the cause is always the same. Often the waters are described as having come from inside the earth. The fountains of the deep are opened, it said. Suddenly enormous volumes of water issue from the earth's center. Water was projected from the mountain like a waterspout. The earth began to rumble, and Atlantis, fair nation of the gods, sunk beneath the salty green waves. It's analogous, partially, with the war in heaven, when the rebellious angels or gods are punished and are cast down into the bowels of the earth. A very significant location, wouldn't you agree? According to legends, some of the Atlanteans managed to survive. And many books have been written about the Atlantean origin of the Egyptian, Sumerian, Indo-Aryan, and native South American civilizations. Little, though, has been written about those who escaped into Western Europe, except for a passing reference in Ignatius Donnelly's Atlantis, the antediluvian world. I'll tell you what he wrote next. This is your connection with the royal houses of Europe. Coming up next on AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640. I'm the guy to call the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. So I was saying before the break, according to legend, the Atlanteans managed to survive through the flood and the destruction of Atlantis. I mean, there's the Atlantean origin and the Egyptian culture, Sumerian, Indo-Aryan, and the native South American civilizations, Quetzalcoatl. But very little's been written about those who escaped into Western Europe, except for a passing reference in one book called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, written by Ignatius Donnelly. He wrote, "The Gauls, meaning the French, possessed traditions upon the subject of Atlantis, which were collected by the Roman historian Timagenes, who lived in the 1st century before Christ. He represents that 3 distinct people dwelt in Gaul. The indigenous population, which I suppose to be Mongoloids, who had long dwelt in Europe. Then 2, the invaders from a distant land, which I understand to be Atlantis. And 3, the Aryan Gaul. That the Merovingian bloodline came from somewhere else is clear, because the legend that surrounds their founder, King Merovee, who is said to have been the spawn of the Kinotar, a giant fish or sea monster who raped his mother when she went to swim in the Atlantic Ocean. Now it becomes clear. Why is he called Merovee? Because in French, the word mer means sea. And in some traditions, Atlantis was called Meru or Maru. It's also the name of the famous world mountain of Eastern tradition. For these gods, navigation was the most important thing to them. Remind you of the Brits? The all-conquering British Empire? Because it was their sea power that maintained their military might and their successful fleet of merchant ships. Trade. Mer is also the origin of the word mercantile. The Atlanteans were associated with the sea and were often depicted as mermen or sea monsters with scales, fins, horns, and they were associated with a few important animals whose symbolism they held sacred: horses, bulls, goats, rams, lions, fish, serpents, dragons, even cats and dogs. All of these things relate back to sea imagery that these gods were associated with. Now let's go back to the Kinotar, which some have named as being synonymous with Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, and according to Plato, one of the famous kings of Atlantis. Others have seen this as being emblematic of the fish symbol that Christ is associated with. That made him, in fact, the origin of the bloodline. But the roots of this Kinotar myth are even more ancient. The word itself can be broken down etymologically to reveal its meaning. The last symbol, tar, in Kinotar, means bull. Taurus, the bull. The first symbol, kin, comes from the same root as king, as well as the biblical name of Cain. King Cain. Kinotar. You see, the father of that particular branch of the Grail family, his family bloodline are now ruling us. The Windsors, as they call themselves. The Bull King who swims in the ocean is a recurring theme in many ancient cultures. The biggest ancient Mesopotamia culture, in fact, comes from the dynasty of kings who reigned over the antediluvian world and who were all well associated with the sea as well as this divine animal imagery. Some of the king names were Sargon, Menes, Narmar. Their historical reality morphed into the legends we have in a lot of cultures of gods said to have come out of the sea at different times and taught mankind the basic arts of civilization: agriculture, metallurgy, architecture, navigation, mathematics, medicine, you name it. They were known by a few names: Ea, Enki, Dagon, Oannes, Marduk, Merodach. They depicted all the same as half man, half fish, half goat, half fish, half bull, half fish. But like I've already said, it's clear that this effect was merely achieved by wearing costumes, and that these god kings were actually using this archetypal imagery to deify themselves in their minds and the minds of their subjects. In other words, they had cast a black magic spell over all citizens. Dagon, Oannes, Enki, all really the same. And interestingly, Marduk, or Merodach, as his son, just as Merovi is the son of the Kinotar. Dagon was depicted with a fish on his head, the lips protruding upward, making what were referred to as horns. This may be the origin of the custom, common in the ancient world, of putting horns on the crown of a king. You know, the most famous comes to mind is the Viking. It also has been acknowledged as the origin of the mitre. That's the hat the Pope wears, the fish-shaped hat. The Christian Church has always been associated with fish. Christ himself was, as John the Baptist, a fisher of men. And the early Christians used the fish sign of the ichthys to designate themselves. From Dagon's name, Oannes, you get the word Uranus, Uranus, Joanna, Janus, and even the first name John. The syllable dag, simply in Dagobert, simply means fish, which makes it interesting, doesn't it, that the Dogon tribe of Africa, who have totally baffled astronomers with their advanced knowledge of astronomy, especially with the faraway star systems from which their gods, they say, came from. They claim these gods were fishmen. I wonder if the words dag and dog aren't etymologically related somehow, especially since the star that these fishmen supposedly came from is the dog star, Sirius. The dog star. From Dagon comes our word dragon. Dragon. He was known as the Lord of the Deep. In fact, many of these gods received the titles the Lord of the Waters, the Lord of the Deep, the Lord of the Abyss, which appeared to have been passed down from father to son along with the throne of the global kingdom, as they knew it then. There are specifically associated inferences, too, with the flood of Noah, which, as I mentioned, destroyed their global kingdom. And the interpreted reign that we talk about, the Grail bloodline, was interrupted. that the Merovingians belonged to. They were consigned to the abyss or the underworld, which is why these gods were known as the lords of both. Enki was also known as the Lord of the Earth, and it's because of this amphibious connection, reigning over both land and sea, that the Merovingians associated with frogs. But the Lord of the Earth title is very significant because it is a title also given to Satan, and it's been historically acknowledged that Enki, as the fish goat man, is a prototype for the zodiac sign of Capricorn, which is itself recognized as a prototype for the modern conception of Lucifer himself, God of the Illuminati. I'm Space, this is AVFS, back with more on Talk Radio AM 640. It's the Spaceman, this is Talk Radio AM 640, final segment in tonight's show. So, as I was saying, the Egyptian myth of Set murdering Osiris mirrored here. A well-known and pivotal episode in Enki's career was his rebellion against his brother Enlil over the succession of the global throne. Enki eventually slays Enlil, something that is recorded in the Egyptian myths. As I said, Set murdering Osiris. And maybe where the biblical story of Cain murdering Abel comes in too. Cain eventually became king. In fact, that's where the word comes from, king, Cain. And it now makes perfect sense why Enki would be called the Kinotar. The identity of Enki and Enlil with Cain and Abel can be proven by the fact that Enlil and Enki were the son of Anu. In some Sumerian legends, the first god-king here on earth. Whereas Cain and Abel were the sons of Adamu, the first man. Adamu and Anu appear to be etymologically related also. This family feud erupted into a long and overdrawn battle. Remind you of the War of the Roses? The battle between two brothers who were split over two factions. These appear to be the same two factions who were at odds over the mating of gods and men to create the Grail bloodline. Those who supported Enki, Satan, or Cain were clearly the ones who were inclined to rebel. But they were overpowered. After they lost the war in heaven, they were cast into the abyss, according to legend. Now the realm of Satan and the earth was flooded to rid the earth of their offspring. Noah's family builds the ark. He has a son, Ham, who has a son, Nimrod, who pursues the same black magic the rulers were practicing before the flood. So he was killed by Shem, who was his uncle. The Tower of Babel. One world government. It ruled the world. Nimrod really was the one who ruled the world as they knew the world at that time. It was the first one, and they want to return to that. This duality, being associated with both the heavenly and the infernal, with both Jesus and Jehovah, Satan and Lucifer, is something that's marked the history of the Merovingian dynasty as well as the other Grail families, and the entire Grail story itself. It is at the heart of the secret spiritual doctrine symbolized by the Grail. This symbolism hits you immediately when you walk in the door of the church at Renlachto and see those opposing statues of the demon Asmodeus and Jesus Christ standing at the same black and white checkered floor, which itself symbolizes the balance of good and evil. Masonry. This principle is also present again by the words placed over the doorway. This place is terrible, but it is the house of God and the gateway to heaven. This phrase turns up in two significant places. One, King James Version of the Bible, when Jacob has his vision of the ladder leading to heaven, with angels ascending and descending. The other is the book of Enoch, black magic, when Enoch is taken for a tour of hell. The existence of this phrase at the entrance of the church, coupled with the images that you see at Rennes-le-Château, you see when you get inside, have an obvious meaning. For the one who was the curator of that church, Berenguer Saunier, who arranged these strange decorations, this church represented some kind of metaphysical gateway between heaven and hell. Rennes-le-Château, by the way, is the town supposedly Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ flee to as they escape the cross in Jerusalem. Here's the big lie. The reference to Satan and Jesus sharing the same blood is very important. A tradition exists, one which finds support among the Book of Enoch, the Black Magic, and others, that Jesus and Satan are in fact brothers, both sons of the Most High God, and they both sat next to his throne in heaven, on the right and left sides, respectively, prior to Satan's rebellion and the war in heaven. The Illuminati want you to believe that Satan should both be a direct son of God, since he is described as God's most beloved angel, and as the brightest star in heaven. The descendants of the fallen kings, who vow to one day return, want desperately to set their new golden age up. And the whole reason is to promote this Grail legend to be their titular head. It was used very effectively by the last of the Merovingian kings, who held the throne of the Austrasian Empire, Dagobert II. Dagobert's entire life, as history recorded, is mythological and archetypal. His name points to a supposedly divine origin of his bloodline. Dagobert comes, of course, from Dagon. Now, the word Bert has in its roots in the word bara or para, or anglicized pharaoh, a priest king of the temple or house. So Dagobert's name literally means priest king of the house of Dagon. Interestingly, a rare find, but nonetheless authentic variation on Dagobert's name was Dragobert, emphasizing his lineage from the beast of the deep waters. I tell you, they are the water kings. They have always conquered through water. Does that tell you about the storm last week? Get a little more about the storm this week? It should. This has been A View from Space on Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm the Spaceman, and Coast to Coast is next. I'm out.